Don't take my skin.
Wait, you cannot laugh, what? You laugh, then I'll laugh. No, I just find it damn funny. Today, I'll be sharing with you the 10 essential things that all photographers should know. Firstly, I think it is very important to have good knowledge of your camera settings, like the ISO, aperture, shutter speed. You don't need to know like the definition of all these terms, but you need to roughly know what all this means and how it relates to one another. So example for aperture is actually the hole in the lens that allows the light to pass through. So usually in camera, it is represented by the f-stop, which means that the lower the f-stops, the bigger the aperture. So when an aperture is bigger, that means more light passes through. When you want to shoot like more bokeh stuff, you shoot with a low aperture. Usually the f-stop is like 1.8 or sometimes 1.4. So this will allow more light to pass through. If you're under like a daylight, a hot day, you probably can't use 1.4 without an ND filter. So it is also important to invest in a good ND filter when you want to get these cinematic shots, because if you don't use a low aperture of like 1.4 or 1.8, you don't get a very nice cinematic like depth of field. And especially when you're shooting outdoors, it is very, very important to get ND filter. It will make a huge difference to your footage. So you can find the ND filter that we're using here. If you're shooting indoors, sometimes you want like a very nice bokeh. You want to blur out the background. So this is a time when you need to use a low aperture. So my favorite settings, I like to use aperture of like between 1.4 to 2.0. It really depends on what you're filming, because sometimes, let's say you are shooting a model applying skincare, you want to make sure that the product is also in focus. But if you shoot in 1.4, let me demonstrate. You might be in focus, but the product is blurred. So in this case, you need to probably use aperture like 2.0 or 2.5. Okay, so I think you can use the aperture of like 1.4 or like very low aperture when you don't need the product to be like super clear. So I think it's very important to know your aperture settings and to make sure that you get it right, because you don't want to like reshoot a whole scene or even like reschedule like a whole shoot just because the product is not in focus. And this is very important, especially if you are dwelling into commercial videography or photography. So moving on, we will go to shutter speed. For shutter speed, right, the higher the number, like let's say 1/200, the better your motion will be captured. So example, if you are shooting someone who is jumping, you want to go for higher shutter speed. If you want to play safe 1/200, you can be pretty sure that your subject will be clear. So for those like very nice night shots where you see a photo of many cars driving across a junction and you see like a trail of lights, like a red light or white light, really depending on the color of the car. How do you achieve that? You actually want to reduce your shutter speed. You don't want it to be very fast, because if it's very fast, you can't capture the trail of light. So you want to put it as like maybe like 5 or 10 seconds depending on your aperture. So again, these three things, I think it correlates for the aperture, the shutter speed and the ISO. So for number 2, I think it is very important for you to know what camera suits you best. So if you have watched my previous video, the Leica camera, I think the camera is very suited for people who want to hold like a compact camera, but you still want to shoot in full frame and a very high quality. So you can go for that kind of camera. If you're shooting for commercials, you probably need a camera that can allow you to change your lens. You need different lenses to suit like different kind of photography. So when I'm shooting product photography, usually I like to use the Sony G Master 24-70. So that one will allow you to play with the focal length. And when I'm shooting, let's say like fashion photography, I like to use my favorite go-to lens is the Sony G Master 85mm 1.4. So that one really gives you a very nice bokeh, and especially when you're shooting outdoors, when you have the luxury of space, you can shoot from very far behind. I will usually prefer 85 to 24-70. It really depends on what kind of concept you're going for. If you want something that captures like the building, you probably will need a 24-70 because it gives you more flexibility to zoom in and out to capture the background. But usually for fashion photography, I think the important subject is the model itself. So I would still go for 85mm. So if you can see all my works, these are all shot in 85mm. If you want to compare it with like a 24-70 one, it is really quite different. So you can see these are some of the different images that I've shot with the Sony 24-70. Of course, you will need to have a few lenses in your camera bag. I would recommend people who want to step into photography to invest in 2 good lenses, so mainly one prime lens and one zoom lens. Sigma has pretty good prime lens as well. So my Sigma lens, it is a 35mm 1.4. The bokeh is really very nice, so if you want to invest in prime lens that captures wide angle shots, you can invest in 35. But if you want to do fashion photography or product photography even, you can consider either 85 or 50mm. I'm using G Master lens as well. They've been in the market for quite a long time and they are quite popular for the lenses because of the crisp quality that the lens produce. So I think the first 2 points focuses a lot on the camera settings, your fundamentals of your camera knowledge. So now I'll be sharing with you more tips on the things that photographers should know based on my experience and from some books that I've been reading. It is common that photographers sell their photos by pricing their photograph itself and thinking that this is the photo that you are selling. You are earning money for this photo, but actually what photographers should actually be selling is the usage rights. So when photographers are selling the photographs, they're actually selling the usage rights of the photos that they created. How photographers earn their job and how photographers earn their rice bowl is, their ability to translate what the client wants into a powerful graphic. So it is very important to sell the graphic based on the usage fees. To reiterate, it is not the photograph that is being sold. It is the usage rights of the photograph that the photographer should be charging. So the most important asset that photographers have is actually the copyrights of your photograph. So when you snap a photo, the copyright actually belongs to the photographer for a lifetime, perpetuity, unless you write out in a contract that the client wants to buy out the images. But more often than not, clients are only buying the usage rights for a period of time. So let's say brand X, they want me to shoot this product to use for their commercial usage. They are paying for 1 year usage of that, but they're not paying for the entire photograph that I snap. So once I snap the photograph belongs to the photographer indefinitely. I think you need to be sure how to charge your copyright fees, or actually called loading fees, properly, because if you undercharge, it actually drives you out of business as well as like other photographers in the market. The clients will probably choose a cheap photographer, like let's say for people who want to spoil market, you price it at $20 per photo, and you have a decent photography portfolio. More often than not, clients will want to save budget and go for the photographer if they are not doing like a big campaign, and this eventually will drive everybody out of business. So it is very important not to undercharge. As a whole in the industry, I think everyone should upkeep a certain base fee that you shouldn't go below. Point 5, how do you charge clients? There is actually this magic formula called the creative fee. I actually learned about it when I was reading a book on how to price your photograph. Creative fee is the basic fee that must be charged for any assignment. So this creative fee will actually take into account your annual overheads, the number of days that you can shoot per year, how many assignment days are you putting aside for this particular client. So these are some of the elements and factors that you need to calculate on your own. Of course, this is a very heavy topic. I wouldn't be able to go all the way to how to come up with the creative fee, but the formula is here. If you want to read more about how to price your photography better, you can actually download this ebook that I found from Overdrive app. So Overdrive app let you borrow books from NLB. You can read it from your phone, from your iPad. So I think when you're free, you just want to level up, you can just download a few books to read. Sometimes to gain this knowledge, it will be helpful to your career. Just like the creative field, I didn't know the exact formula or how to better price my service until I read the book. I will leave the link in the description below, so if you want to, you can go and borrow the book.